My story begins when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was always a very quiet, very shy girl. I really kept to myself. Shyer. I was more of an observer, paying attention to my surroundings. Totally different, for example, from my mom and my sister. My mom was always that beautiful, put together woman who always smelled nice. And my sister with her own style. My sister was always that girl who draws attention wherever she goes. The kind of person who walks in, is beautiful, knows how to speak well, knows how to assert herself, and has that presence. I've always admired my sister, but honestly, I was never like her. Actually, my body was different from hers. And my mom would already criticize me for that. She would always make kind of mean comments to me. She constantly compared me to my sister. She always told me to be like my sister in similar things. As much as I loved and admired my sister, honestly, I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for being like her. But the worst actually happened when I reached my preteen years and I got my period. I gained a lot of weight, and my mom was always putting me down. She always said I was fat, obese, ugly, and those words cut me like shards of glass. They cut to hurt, they cut deep. And that triggered a lot of things in me. I had really bad anxiety attacks because I couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror. I just couldn't stand it. I had such a big problem, such a huge problem with the mirror, that there was a day I was in the bathroom and I hated myself so much. I hated myself so much that I broke the bathroom mirror. Like, it was almost sick, really, because I couldn't love myself. I couldn't look at myself. I couldn't lift myself up. And then the pandemic came. The schools started to close and we had to start studying at home. And that was the time when I spent the most time with my family. And every comment, every laugh, every word that was said that hurt me ended up making me even more impulsive. And what I was already doing, which was living impulsively with anxiety, I started to have depression and panic disorder. And I ended up taking it all out on food. So I gained even more weight. And it was always a reason for people to talk about me, to talk about my life. And I was always very close to my dad. My parents, they're separated. So he was an absent father, but I always loved him just the way he was. Just so you have an idea, there was this story where my sister was involved with my cousin on my dad's side, and we were having lunch with my dad's side of the family. And this subject came up, and my dad had a really aggressive reaction. He went to our house and hit my sister. He was really upset to find out about this romantic relationship between the cousins. So, like, I saw a lot of things in my house. My dad wasn't really present, but my dad was hitting my sister. My sister was prettier, but she was getting beaten because she was having a romantic relationship with my cousin. But my mom loved my sister more than me, or at least it seemed that way, because my sister got more of the spotlight than I did. And for me, it was all a mix of confusion between the pandemic, my impulses, my sister who was going through that situation. Everything was very delicate, inside my house. So I ended up having these anxiety attacks, depression, and even panic disorder that made me get worse and worse. And I was younger. And what happened? When my sister turned 17, she got pregnant. My sister got pregnant as a teenager. And so, even though it was a shock for the whole family, for me, my nephew was my lifesaver. You know, I thank my sister every day for bringing my nephew into my life. I absolutely adore him. But then, what happened with all of this? Things started to get a little more on track during that time. The thing is, my mom started putting 3 times more expectations on me now. Because since my sister was kind of busy taking care of my nephew, I was the one who studied a lot. I was always very smart, I was always very dedicated. And in my plans, I even thought about going to medical school. All that expectation was put on me, that I was the one who was going to succeed, that I was the one who was going to make a difference. you know? And so that was the period when my dad got close to our family again. And it was a time when we got even closer to my dad's side of the family, especially my grandfather. He was an important part of my whole emotional support system. Since at home we lived with that pressure, that comparison, that lack of validation, or rather that search for validation, that need to succeed. And my sister was going through her own situation. I was able to get that emotional support from there. And that helped me keep my head straight, kept me grounded. I was always a very determined girl, very much so. And then one day I was at church, which I always liked, and I ended up meeting a guy from the youth group at church. I was 14 and he was 16, and his dream was to become a professional soccer player. And I really supported him in his dreams. And during that time, I was already finishing my third year because I was more advanced. I was finishing up. I had already been accepted into college for aesthetics and cosmetology to work in the health field, which is something I've always been passionate about. It turns out that during this process, I started making products, handmade products. I started creating actual beauty products, handmade and all that. And then I started my own brand and I started selling. And then this brand started giving me a really good income. My boyfriend, seeing that it was a good business, he gave it up. Can you believe he gave up his dream of being a professional player to work with me in my company? And then we started working together, running our company. And then over time, my boyfriend, well, things started getting better. We started saving our money. And believe it or not, I am 17 years old and my boyfriend is 19. He just passed the civil service exam, so we achieved financial stability really early. We managed to understand all of this. Honestly, I lost a lot of my teenage years because of it, focusing on our dreams, our projects, on building our life. Just so you have an idea, I'm 17. This July, next month, is our engagement party. In November, I turn 18. In April 2027, it's our wedding. And we even have enough money to buy our own house already. But I really want to go to college. I really want this relationship. We have a lot of balance, both practically and emotionally. And many people, many, practically everyone, ask me the same thing. Don't you think it's too soon? Don't you think you're too young to get married and take on all this responsibility? But guys, I'm not being forced into anything. I'm not getting married to run away from home. I'm not marrying someone who doesn't have any kind of stability. He's my partner. He's my business partner. He's my best friend. He's the kind of man I've always wanted by my side. He's a good guy. He's a fair guy. And I am too. I'm focused. I own a company. Not to brag, but I'm smart. I know that everything I do with great taste. So whenever I hear stories about girls my age, at 17 years old, they're in that phase where they're losing themselves. Some are experimenting with drugs. Others are going out with married men. Others are pregnant, including my sister, right? Because at my age, my sister was having a baby. That's definitely something I want for myself in the future. So I know that my story was filled with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of trauma. A lot of comments tried to put me down, tried to bring me down, but none of that was enough to actually make me fall. Quite the opposite, actually. Today I see that I am a woman who has achieved and is still achieving what I want. I feel in my heart that I am on the right path. I feel that my life has meaning. I feel that the way things are happening is according to God's plans, with what God has for our lives. So I'm really grateful. Even though I came from a place with a lot of pain, where there were a lot of comments that put me down, where my body was more important than my own intelligence, I am living proof that we can overcome. Don't let yourself be shaken by comments, because a mother has such a big influence over our lives. A mother's comment changes the way we see ourselves. And I've already broken mirrors so I wouldn't have to look at myself. And today I own a handmade cosmetics brand, and I'm going to work specifically in women's beauty. You know the saying about making lemonade from lemons? I feel like that's what I did with my life. And that's exactly why I share my story. So you can find a little inspiration. We see so many stories of trauma, of pain, of painful endings, right? That the person is left completely traumatized, right? Unemployed and things like that. And I felt that with my story, I managed to do things differently. I managed to focus on what really mattered, which was my future. I didn't let my past define who I am, and I don't allow my past to define where I'm going. It doesn't matter where I came from, what matters is where I'm going. So, girls, use my story as an example for you to understand that when a man wants to be by your side, he gives up his dreams to be with you, just like many times we give up our dreams to be with someone else, because there is a purpose. Also, when you feel that desire in your hearts, the desire to do business, to sell something, stop being ashamed. Sometimes the opportunity is right at your door, and that's what will change your life. And I'm really grateful because I'm just at the beginning of my career, I'm just at the beginning of my life, but I feel like I'm building solid things, real things, and things that really came from God. So, besties, how are you all doing? What an amazing story, right? I was reading and seeing the transformation, the metamorphosis you went through from the beginning to the end, how she managed to turn things around, right? From totally fat phobic comments to becoming the owner of a company, right? And studying aesthetics. It's really beautiful to see how someone seeks this transformation and how she believes she can be different and that she can, find her place in the world and that she can transform the beauty of other women. So I bring this as inspiration. If you're feeling down, feeling like a failure, or feeling unloved, believe me, there are other chances for you to succeed out there. You just need to ask for the right guidance. You need wisdom and discernment, and embrace the opportunities that come your way. Send me your stories if you also started a business at a young age. Tell me more, I'll be honest. I wanted her to tell me more about her factory process, about the production, how it all went, and everything, right? But who knows, maybe she'll send it to me. To watch videos early, become a channel member using the link in the description. Send your story through the channel's stories at historiascanaldietipaula.com. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Kisses. And see you in the next video.